So first, there are three implications for us to consider about this little tax narrative going on. First, everything that Caesar has and any authority that he might claim is first and foremost derivative from God and from what God claims. A well-known passage that rings of this as well, that we'll get to in a couple of chapters, I'm sure, is when Jesus is on trial and they're trying to put him to death. And Jesus is talking with another Roman official named Pontius Pilate. And Jesus is pretty much just ignoring Pilate. And Pilate says, dude, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you trying to give me answers? Don't you recognize that I have the power to crucify you or to free you? And Jesus says, you only have power because my Father gave it to you. Caesar and all his lackeys only have power because God first allowed them to have it. Another biblical observation for us is that Caesar's possessions and powers are all limited. In Acts 5, followers of Jesus are told to stop preaching about Jesus in the city that they're going about. And they respond and say, well, you might think that it's better to follow man than God, but we think that it's better to follow God than man. When human laws would lead a Christian into disobedience against God, the Bible recognizes that human leadership does not have the authority to do so. There's a line that's crossed. There's limits to their power and possessions of earthly authorities. The early church was so committed to following the ways of Jesus because they were commanded to go and share the gospel. And to be told to stop doing that was against what God had commanded them to do. So they respectfully went on and did that. And I say respectfully because they were still respectful. They would later be imprisoned again. They didn't try to lead revolts or riots. They just said, okay, we're going to prison again because we were faithful to what God had called us to do. Now, the first 2 points of this are not too difficult for us to acknowledge or understand or try to implement in our life. But the third one might be a little tougher. Because God owns and has authority over everything, we serve him by submitting to our leaders and authorities. As long as we are not being led to sin, Christians are called to be humble and submissive. For the Lord's sake, followers of Jesus are humble and submissive people. We drive the speed limit. We obey our parents, right, kids? We obey our parents? That's right. I see some nods. They're a little shameful to admit it, but that's what they're trying to do. We obey our parents. We submit to our church leaders. If we're employees, we show up to work on time. We do what the leaders ahead of us have called us to do. When Caesar's increased tax plan goes through, we pay it. When there is when they turn the speed limit to 25 on a road that it makes no sense to have to drive 25 on, we drive it because we're good citizens. Christians are called to live counterculturally, and right now, you and I live in a moment where rebellion and violence are quickly taken up by all political sides, by all different groups of people. By living in a humble and submissive way, we honor God and testify to his ultimate authority over our lives. Christians are not called to be violent. They're not called to stir up riots or blatantly disobey laws. We are called to honor and respect God by honoring and respecting the leaders that he has allowed to have authority over us.